Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Lower Providence Township Board of Supervisors for Thursday, March 19th, 2015. Prior to the pledge this evening, I do have an announcement. Following the pledge, please remain standing for a moment of silence in memory of Carl A. Buckenauer, who passed away March 3rd. Mr. Buckenauer was a township supervisor from 1978 to 1983. He was also a longtime member of the Township Sewer Authority, serving for a total of 29 years and acting as chairman of the authority for 6 of those years. A page will be set aside in the minutes recognizing Mr. Buckenauer's dedicated service to our community. Now please join me in the pledge in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Good evening. Deb, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Mr. Shagini.
Here.
Mr. Duffy.
Here.
Mrs. Ekman.
Here.
Mr. Thomas.
Here.
And Mrs. Zimmerman is absent.
Thank you, Deb. Prior to the meeting this evening, an executive session was held in order to discuss legal and real estate matters. The first item before us tonight is the consent agenda. Included in the consent agenda are the minutes from the previous meeting in February because our first March meeting was snowed out. Also minutes from all of the boards in the township, monthly reports from staff, and fiscal matters including several escrow releases and an extension request for Shannondale Phase 3 and authorization of payment of bills. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I would make that motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
Motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our next agenda items on the this evening involve presentations to several of our residents who have served on our boards and commissions. And first this evening will be a presentation to Anthony Pisa for his service on the Library Board of Trustees, and I'll ask Supervisor Thomas to present that this evening.
Yes, here. Sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Pease, it's good to see you tonight.
Thank you. Good to see you.
In recognition of your service to the Library Board, the Lower Providence Township would like to present you with this memento and our gratitude for stepping up and helping the library to succeed in Lower Providence and to become basically a jewel of the township. And I just want to thank you personally.
Thank you.
Did you want to say anything tonight?
Sure. I would like to thank the Township Commissioners and the Library Board for offering me an opportunity to serve on the Library Board. It introduced me to a number of people, including board members as well as library staff, to people who are very dedicated to enriching the Lower Providence community, and it was a very gratifying experience. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we'll recognize Adam Suplee for his service on the Planning Commission.
Hi there. How are you? Adam, all right. Great, thank you. You want to put up or just Adam will be there? Adam, on behalf of Lower Providence Township and the Lower Providence Township Board of Supervisors, we'd like to present you with this recognition of your time on the Planning Commission. I know during your time in the Planning Commission you were extremely well respected by your members and your colleagues on the board that they considered you one of the leaders had you be their chairman. So thank you very much for your extreme hard work. I know all the time that you spent is paying dividends, especially as we're getting ready to consider and approve a new Ridge Pike zoning ordinance. And I know you were instrumental in that work, and your vision went a long way. So on behalf of the board, thank you very much for all your time and your effort, and especially when you're taking time away from your family. It is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much.
I'd like to express that I'm very happy to be able to serve the public, and really enjoyed the time that I had with the Planning Commission, and I look forward to future opportunities to working with the township. Thank you.
And next, we have Nancy McFarland honoring her service on the Zoning Hearing Board. It's an honor to recognize you, Nancy, after many decades of dedicated service to the residents of Lower Providence. And tonight, we're recognizing you for your service on the Zoning Hearing Board. You've truly made a difference in this township. On behalf of the Board of Supervisors and all the residents, we thank you for your years of service, and we're happy to present you with this small token of our appreciation.
It's ironic, tonight we recognized Carl Buchenauer. Carl and I ran together for the first time in 1978. And Carl was very instrumental in working with the Lower Providence Business and Professional Men's Association. And as far as Nancy goes, she spent 20 years in this seat as a supervisor and loved it. And I've been 38 years as a committee woman, 10 years on the zoning board, and prior to being a supervisor, I was a volunteer with the Lower Providence Park Board, which really was a non-existent thing. We had summers in the park, in Evansburg Park, in that building they tore down, and I spent a whole summer teaching crafts down there and had my children. It's been a pleasure serving our township, and I'm glad I spent the time with it. And it took a lot of time. It's hard to juggle family and public service. It's a feat to behold, but I did it, I enjoyed it, and I know all the supervisors that served with me enjoyed it, and I hope all of you enjoy it. It isn't a job, it's a pleasure, and the results of it are shown in our township. I'm very proud when I look at that library, and it's the only one around, and I work in the courthouse in Norristown, and I hear about our library, and I just puff up my chest. You know, what are you going to do? Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'm actually going to deviate a little bit from the printed agenda to move one of the items further up. Item 5B under new business, discussion and consideration of promulgation of emergency operations plan, and I'll ask Charlie DeFrancesco to discuss that with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of the Lower Providence Township Emergency Operation Plan is to prescribe those activities to be taken by the Township Board of Supervisors and other township employees and community officials for the protection of persons and property in Lower Providence Township in the event of a natural or man-made emergency. This plan is authorized and is in accordance with the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Service Code, also known as Title 35. Earlier this year, I conducted an annual review of the plan and made the corrections and updates as needed. Tonight, I am asking for the promulgation by the board of Supervisors, so I may file a current copy with the county and the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Comments from the board?
Charlie, could you just tell us whether there are any main or major areas that needed to be updated?
No, some minor changes, and there was one more change that's not noted. On page 1, section 2A, I just want to update the census to reflect the 2010 census.
Any other comments? Okay, would anyone like to make a motion rather for the promulgation of emergency operations plan?
I'll make that motion for the revised emergency operations plan.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
At this time, I will ask for a motion to adjourn the public meeting and enter into a public hearing. I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Let the record reflect that we are now in a public hearing. There are 3 items for consideration on the public hearing this evening. The first, consideration of an ordinance amending Section 143-8, zoning map of Lower Providence Township, rezoning 2 separate parcels to R3 Residential District. And John Rice.
Okay, the first ordinance, which is before the board, is a zoning map amendment. It is proposed ordinance 2015-622. The ordinance was advertised in the Times Herald March 5th and March 12th. It would rezone parcel 43-0002-815-02-2 from VC to R3, and would also rezone a separate parcel 43-00-02815-01-3 from PBO professional to R3. This is a proposed ordinance as a result of a rezoning petition which was filed by WB Homes. These are parts of the Superior 2 property in the township. I know that Mr. Garrity is here representing WB Homes, as is Mr. Canavan, and I would just ask Mr. Garrity if he would like to briefly describe the reason for the requested rezoning and the ordinance on behalf of WB Homes.
I'd be happy to, and in order to expedite matters and with the board's permission, I would take 3A and B together, if you like. That's how I've presented the comments. They're both our ordinances.
Okay, well, why don't we do it that way? They're both involving WB Homes. They were both submitted at the same time.
And they're both involving Superior 2 properties.
Both involving different Superior 2 properties. And Mr. Garrity, why don't you then explain the other ordinance, that would be 2015-623.
I'd be happy to. I think Mr. Fury wants to enter his appearance.
Mr. Rice, members of the board, Michael Fury, attorney from Audubon, entering appearance on behalf of Superior Tube Company, Inc., asking to be granted party status. To be clear, that is the actual plant properties that are adjacent to or across the street from the subject properties.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks.
Fury.
Just for the record, members of the board, my name is Jim Garrity. I'm an attorney with Whistler, Pearlstein, and Bluebell, and I'm representing WB Homes this evening with Chris Canavan, who's also here with me. There are actually 2 ordinances. Mr. Rice described the first one, which is about a 5.5 acre property to the east of the existing industrial facility that is proposed to be rezoned from VC and PBO to R3 to permit 12 single-family homes as shown in the exhibit. Actually, I think 16 single-family homes would technically fit on that property under your zoning, but we're only proposing 12. The second zoning ordinance amendment is a text amendment to your industrial district. So the property would remain industrial, but it would be added to those regulations would be added another conditional use which would permit townhouses, generally speaking, pursuant to your R4 regulations, although R4 is no longer specifically mentioned in the ordinance, and specific regulations have been substituted. It would only permit townhouses in the industrial district by conditional use, so we would need another hearing before you, and only if there are these four requirements: 32 contiguous acres, all of the environmental areas, and that is floodplain, wetlands, etc., are to be preserved, and environmental remediation is to take place on the property. It is to both be proposed and required. And you can enforce that, of course, in the conditional use. And finally, the architectural styles and standards are to be specifically demonstrated and, again, required in the conditional use. And there are, as you can see from your pamphlets, many architectural requirements that have been inserted into the ordinance so that you know what you'll be getting over and above the conditional use requirements. There were 2 or 3 meetings and many discussions before we even filed for these zoning ordinance amendments. Just going through them, in February of last year, May of last year, August of last year is when we filed, so this has been formally pending in the township since August of last year, and we have met with the Planning Commission last September, with the Planning Commission and the Supervisors in September, and we had a meeting also in September with Mr. Fury, who is the counsel for STCI, who is the successor in interest to the Superior Tube Facilities. Superior Tube Company, having sold both the ground that we're talking about and the ground that Mr. Fury represents by Superior Tube Corporation and, Superior Tube Company. And so we're all the equitable owners, or in Mr. Fury's case, the legal owner of those properties. Our first plan, I think the single-family plan is very, very simple, and I don't know, are we going to put those up? I can talk about them for a minute. There's a quick PowerPoint. The larger site you can see on the map there. Whoops, we're on number 2 already. There we go. The larger site on the left is the townhouse property right on Germantown Pike, and the smaller circle on the right is the much smaller, I think it's only 5.5 acre site where the single-family homes are permitted. Basically the same zoning as the homes to the right of that circle. And you have, I think, the site plan with you. If I could just go to the next slide, I'll do the first 3 quickly. There's the 2 circles again. The purple you can see is the industrial, and the property that had been zoned V, Village, and PBO, the smaller circle, was kind of an island sitting out there. It'll now be this exact same zoning as the bluish purple zoning above it, so it'll be attached to another zoning and will no longer be kind of floating out there as professional office. The larger circle, again, to the left shows that it is remaining industrial because it's remaining purple, as you can see on the map. And then, I guess, one more, if we could. This is what I guess everyone would call an existing features plan, if I can use my own little gadget here. Again, the larger piece is these 4 lots, which were part of the Superior Tube site. Superior Tube is still here, the building is still here, and then the other site that we're talking about is the piece to be zoned R3, which is this site here, which would become 12 single-family lots. These 4 lots here would become 139 townhouses subject to the regulations that I mentioned previously. When we first submitted our rezoning plan in August of last year, we had basically all straight roads, one entrance on Germantown Pike. Our village green areas were very small and not particularly attractive, and the entrance road in from Germantown Pike was completely straight with no boulevard, no trees whatsoever. We kept working with township staff, with the supervisors, and our designers, and came up with a completely new plan in the middle of the process where we added another entrance on Germantown Pike, 2 boulevards, so that both Germantown Pike entrances would be tree-lined and have a strip of green down the middle, also with trees. There's a large village green in the middle. There are 2 housing types proposed instead of 1. I think you would call them both townhouses, but they're much different so that customers would have, or buyers would have, the prospect of 2 different housing types. More dormers were added, more windows were added, the straight roads were curved, and different windows were added, so that if you go from that plan showing existing conditions to the next slide, you'll see the townhouse development now, if I can find it. When all the layers get on there, you'll see it's changed a great bit. The straight driveway that was here into the site with no boulevard whatsoever has now been made into a boulevard with trees and has curved to be a little bit more interest. The road going through the site now takes a hike, if you will, right in the middle, and these buildings are not perpendicular on purpose, again, to give the project more interest. The other entrance has been added here and again made a boulevard with trees down the middle, again to give it more interest. A very large center green has been placed in the middle here instead of the smaller center green that used to be there. All these open space areas along Germantown have been saved and preserved so that any trees don't have to be touched, and none of the environmental features to the rear of the site will be touched at all, including this little finger, if you will, of treed area. So basically all of the environmental features are preserved and will be preserved permanently. The units, as I said, basically, not entirely, but basically using this thoroughfare as a dividing line will be the 2 dividing lines between the housing types so that we can try to create neighborhoods around the greens. So this green here will have 1 housing type that will be completely different from this green here. So that we'll have, I hope, little neighborhoods around the greens with the houses facing the greens, so they have the benefit not only of the separation from the other townhouses, but also a large green area in the middle in that separation area, which should make everything much more attractive. We really have to thank township staff and the supervisors who participated in redesigning what we had proposed. It'll be a much more attractive community now. And we also had a lot of discussion regarding the architecture so that it would not be your basic kind of block style architecture for these townhouses, but 2 completely different types with lots of architectural features, windows, dormers, offsets, changes in building materials, etc., so that it is as attractive as it can possibly be, given the obvious realities of the site, which include the environmental situation, the presence of a large industrial building right here, the traffic and noise on Germantown Pike, and finally the very different retail and industrial zoning on the other side of Germantown Pike. So we're putting a buffer, we believe, for the township between the single-family homes all to the rear back here, then the creek, then multifamily, and then the busy highway with completely different commercial and industrial zoning, as I said. We're doing this at the same time as we are leaving this industrially zoned, so that the number of industrially zoned acres in the township is not diminished. It will stay completely the same, and Mr. Rice can certainly tell you that the case law says, with regard to any of these situations, that if a person has a choice between industrial and townhouse or townhouse and mobile home, and the choice is made to go to townhouse or any other kind of zoning, the township still has the protection of that zoning because a voluntary choice was made, notwithstanding the zoning, to do something else. And that's what we're proposing. From a planning standpoint with regard to this zoning, it is a better buffer, as I said before, between the commercial and the traffic on Germantown Pike and the single family to the rear. The soil and groundwater issues on the site are being resolved as part of this rezoning and will be part of the required conditional use. We believe it's more compatible with the obvious community goals that the township has for this area for the future. As I said before, although in the single-family zoning we would be permitted 16 dwellings, we will have only 12. In the townhouse, which, as I said, was modeled on R4, which would permit 6 units per acre and 205 townhouses on the site, we have 139. In addition, just by way of comparison to R4, the building coverage is 10% instead of 35%. The impervious coverage is 24% instead of 45%. The minimum open space instead of 20% is 30.6 acres. I'm sorry, 30.6%. The density on the townhouse is, instead of 6, is 3.92, and instead of 205, as I said, it's 139. Instead of 5 units per building, we have, as you can see here, I think I counted 34 buildings. Only 7 of them are 5s. All of the rest of them are 4s. So they're not unrealistically sized townhouse dwellings where you think you're seeing a whole bunch of row houses like 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 in a row. The most we have, except for 7 buildings, is 4, and on those 7 buildings, it's only 5. Finally, there are 10.85 acres of permanently dedicated open space with this plan and all of the architectural features that I mentioned before. And we very much understand that we still have both conditional use and land development approval to go through. So in the conditional use approval, we'll be able to talk about everything that you can't normally talk about in the zoning development in terms of architecture, colors, plantings, landscaping, all those things will be up to the board's discretion. We'll have a plan, and then the conditional use will allow the board to make the development conditioned on the conditional use, and you will make absolutely certain that you get what we are promising. So with that fast background, I'd be happy to answer your questions or any questions from the audience.
Well, before the board asks whatever questions the board has, Mr. Garrity, where are you with DEP and Act 2 clearance from them, and what other, what do you foresee going forward in terms of the environmental issues there?
Mr. Canavan brought with him the full environmental report, but it's my understanding that we have agreement with DEP on the Act 2 process. Obviously, until that contract is signed, we're not obligated to clean it up, but the ordinance requires the cleanup. So we will have to bring those two things together. I believe our generic or our basic Act 2 plan for the property, both groundwater contamination and soil contamination, have been generally approved by DEP, so that we will be able to get an Act 2 certification for the property.
Okay. And you would need that before you could sell
Units.
lots, develop it residentially? Is that, Mr. Canavan looks like he has the answers there.
He
Mr. Garrity knows I
always does.
can't possibly keep my mouth shut. As I think I've mentioned before to this board, we have a approved combined remedial investigation and cleanup plan, and in the Act 2 process, that's the first step. That's identifying the known problems and hazards, that's going to DEP with a plan to address the known environmental hazards, and then they basically concur that the cleanup plan we have laid out in this report is acceptable to them. Many of these items are things you can't necessarily implement until you actually go to construction. Things like vapor barriers underneath residential units, things like the capping of the soil site area that we've talked about in the past in the upper right corner of the site. Those are things that will happen during construction. The Act 2 actual letter of liability release that we will receive is when we've proven compliance with the items we've detailed within this plan. So the Act 2 compliance will come as we implement the responsible items within this area. One of the major ones is going to be an environmental covenant that has to be filed against the site specifically related to the groundwater contamination, and then that covenant will restrict what we can do on the site, specifically related to no additional groundwater wells can be drilled on the site, and the requirement to put the vapor barriers and the passive sub-slab depressurization pipes that we've talked about in the past that would vent any accumulated buildup underneath the vapor barriers.
And there's no basements proposed.
There are no basements
on the-
proposed
right.
on this plan, and
So
nor
there'll
would
be
we.
a slab, a
A vapor barrier,
venting
slab,
system.
venting underneath in case there was any eventual buildup on that, that would then allow for any accumulated TCE-related fumes to then be vent and dissipate in the air where it would be more appropriate than anything built up within a building.
Assuming the process moves forward, I think Act 2 compliance, even though it might seem redundant because you've been before us and before the Planning Commission before, it will bear repeating each time we go through the process. I know the members of the board continue to get queries from residents wondering about that, so just please be prepared throughout all of this to answer all of those questions. And can you answer, does DEP do a site visit to ensure Act 2 compliance as you go through with construction?
They will, since some of the items are site-specific, meaning the soil capping, they will confirm and evaluate that part of it. They will evaluate the uniform environmental covenant that we have to file on there, and will confirm that that is an appropriate document. So yes, there is concurrence all the way along the process. And I will even add, just as an example of how we continue to work through this process, we had a pre-application meeting with DEP on our potential NPDES permit for this site. Because as many of you know, one of the first things we'll have to do for our stormwater evaluation will be to do infiltration testing on this site. Well, if you have groundwater contamination, the question was, can you still do infiltration testing? And so we are working with DEP to confirm that. The answer is yes, because of the groundwater issue is 20 to 30 feet below surface, and the infiltration we're doing is only somewhere in the 6 to 8 foot range. But those are things that we continue to evaluate on each step of this process, so that even when we go through our sewer design and approval with DEP, they'll be evaluating those items as we work through it. So there'll be multiple checks on that.
Thank you.
Yes.
I had a quick question on the upper right corner area that's going to be capped.
Yes.
What is the plan for who will be responsible for maintenance of that capping ad infinitum?
The homeowners association, which will be the eventual owner of that piece of ground, will be the one that will be the owner occupier of that piece of ground and will be responsible for the maintenance of that area with the 2-foot cap.
And that would be responsible to DEP for that?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris, 2 points.
Sure.
One, you're going to require any potential buyers to sign disclosures knowing that they're fully aware of any of the potential
Yes.
or any of the environmental.
And I believe when we've spoke in the past, we do our own, and I believe Mr. Rice also asked if we'd be willing to commit to use one that is prepared by the township, and we're happy to do that. We've done that in other communities, and that way we can make sure there's appropriate notification to all potential buyers and have the opportunity to review all the reports that we've prepared.
And then the other concern that I have is obviously if you're, part of the remediation is venting built-up TCE fumes that were be in the ground or be in a building, does that pose any kind of safety hazard to the public at large?
No,
If you're
and I
venting
think-
TCE fumes into the atmosphere?
And I think I don't want to overstate this too much, because the vapor barriers and the passive venting is what I would call a belts and suspenders situation. As I noted, the groundwater contamination issue is 20 to 30 feet at closest to the surface. If we put slab-on-grade units, the best we'll be doing is excavating somewhere between 4 and 5 feet below surface to put the slabs in, and the vapor barriers will be below that. So these are only in the worst-case scenario if through some fractured rock something may vent up there. We do not anticipate any type of accumulated venting needed, but DEP looks at this as an opportunity when there's groundwater contamination to provide this as a belts and suspenders approach. This is not something we anticipate happening, but in case it does, there's a system in place to handle it.
If I can put that almost in layman's terms, it'll be so diluted by normal air
Yeah.
that it'll have no impact whatsoever. The only place it could potentially be detrimental is if you stuck your head under the vapor barrier where it's deliberately trapped, which would be pretty difficult to do.
And the ability for it to actually even, the vapor to rise to that area is very limited due to basically the rock formations that we have in this area, which why infiltration won't go down to groundwater, same reason the vapors won't come up to where our units will be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, now you have me curious, though. How
Okay.
deep do the venting pipes go?
Venting pipes just go basically just below the vapor
The
barrier.
vapor barrier,
Yeah,
okay.
so they're
Just a few feet down.
Yeah, the slab is going to be, as I said, probably 3 to 4 feet, depending on where you look at the existing surface. The vapor barrier is at the very bottom of that, and then the pipe just vents that area. Does that answer your question, Mr. Duff?
It does. I mean, I'm obviously, if we go ahead and we permit the zoning change and then the conditional use, I'm concerned that any kind of environmental exposure does not affect the community at large up there.
Right, and as I said, this is the preferred and recommended method by DEP. This isn't something we've come up with for site-specific here. I've dealt, as I've mentioned before this board and in many other communities where we've done Act 2, and one of the typical responsibilities is, as a belts and suspenders method, if there's any type of subsurface issues, is put a vapor barrier in, just in case. And that's sort of like the afterthought item of throw a vapor barrier in. So that's what we do. And building code requires a certain amount of vapor barriers anyway, and this is just a supplement to that.
Mr. Garrity?
Yeah, I did have one more question for you. So the single-family homes will not need any remediation?
No, the TC plume moved only west, from what we have on our maps. The source of it was in this area of the property, and we have maps that show where the plumes generate out and at what degree. And the single-family homes do not fall into that. It does not meet the plume on that side. So there's no environmental cleanup needed on that property.
But you will treat each townhome unit with the same condition, with the vapor barrier?
Every one of the units in here, basically, and quite frankly, what ends up happening is, a 4-unit building or a 5-unit building gets poured at one time. They all have one contiguous vapor barrier underneath of them.
Okay.
Gary, is there anything else you want to present?
Just answer questions if anyone has any other issues or concerns, or the audience does.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the audience for the public hearing? Yes, sir. Please come forward and state your name for the record.
My name is Richard Opperman. I live at 305 Collegeville Road, up the upper end of the township. My first thing is that I wish the township would have bought that for the Little League. We wouldn't be going through this, but anyhow, that's passed. In reference to the plan here, you see the roads coming out on Germantown Pike and River Road there? Has anybody been there lately to see how the traffic situation is? It's horrendous. And putting another 300 cars out there is not going to help the situation at all. So I think that should be considered. And in that situation also, I don't see anything wrong with the 12 houses that are on the other side that they're talking about putting in. How about the other ground that's with Superior, where it was Village Commercial on that same side of Cross Keys? Are they proposing anything there?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
On Cross Keys Road?
Yes.
Well, you can flip to the next drawing.
You
want to go to the next one?
Right here.
Okay. Hold on 1 second. You there? There you go.
You're talking this property right here? Well, I'm talking this property right here, the green and over to here.
Uh-huh.
Is that part of the?
It's part of the piece we're talking about tonight, but it's not contiguous.
Yeah, okay. So that's not going to be developed then?
It is, this piece, the green piece.
Yeah, this one. How about this one and this piece up there?
No.
If I could just answer through the radio here. The piece you're talking about here is not part of what we're buying. We have no ownership rights or anything along that line.
Because that was changed over to
Yeah.
Village Commercial.
And this piece, the long skinny piece coming out Cross Keys to Germantown Pike right here, at most you may see a little bit of a stormwater management facility there, but no construction whatsoever at all.
That's fine. That's good.
And to answer your earlier question, yes, we're very well aware of traffic concerns. The traffic impact study will have to be part of the development process. And also, we're cognizant of keeping in mind the long-term goals of a second bridge and where that would come in with regard to realignment of Ridge and Germantown.
If I may, I did some drawings way back when when Mrs. Crahola was our representative. I had taken some drawings to her. Can I show you something? These are not engineered drawings. These are my drawings, what they should do. And I think maybe before this is approved, they should redo something with the roads. So,
I can tell you that we've had preliminary discussions with the other municipalities about the second bridge and road realignment. Also, the second bridge is on the plan for the next decade in infrastructure development in Pennsylvania. Part of that will involve extensive environmental study, but we definitely have our eye on making sure that any infrastructure or any development that happens in this area is also done thoughtfully with infrastructure development in mind.
so that's basically why I'm here, because of the traffic situation.
Yes.
I mean, I can't tell them what to do with their property, but I think these other things should be considered before you go ahead with this, because it's a problem. And I don't think just because the Arcola Bridge is out is never going to change this problem. If you ever go up through Trapp and watch the traffic coming down through Limerick, from Limerick down through Collegeville and Trapp, all that traffic goes this way, it's got to come back this way.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's why whether it's this potential development or Ridge Pike, the new zoning that we're talking about on Ridge Pike, all of it has traffic in mind.
Right, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Also, TCE did come east because they made people on Evansburg Road hook up to the water.
That would be me.
So I just want to let you know.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that I have everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes?
Sorry,
Sorry, Mr. Carey.
I was just going to comment, as the board probably knows on the traffic situation. We have volunteered to participate financially in a global traffic study, not just our site, but I think the township's interested in a much bigger area, and we volunteered to contribute to the cost of that.
Yes, sir.
My name is Irv Zimmerman. I reside at 301 Evansburg Road. I got up here and talked to you before about WB Homes. I know they build a real nice home, and what the board has said tonight and what my concerns were, and you, sir, about the environmental things that we're concerned about, you know, and all. On this drawing here, it's over in here where the ball fields used to be.
Just go back.
I can remember.
There you go.
I can remember this all down here when they were pumping one of the 5 wells up here. This ground, the water that ran down here was a bluish green. But you're saying to us that the contamination started in here, which it did. But what about all this? And now it's up there. And like another one was saying, that the people have to be educated, and I think you're working on that. About this air quality. I live on 301 Evansburg Road. I have 2 people in my family that have cancer. And we were just advised yesterday to have the 3rd person checked for this cancer. They're telling my water's fine. They put water in all over the place around me, but they haven't even considered mine. They say it's below the legal limits. Last year, DEP came to me and said, "You've been a long-time resident of Lower Providence." I said, "Yes, I have." They said, "Well, we got a problem. It's not in Lower Providence, but it's Skipview Drive." They have found contaminants down there in back of those houses. And they asked me if I knew of anybody that maybe had dumped industrial waste or anything down there that got into the groundwater. And I said, I've known those people that had that farm for a long time, and my parents, when they were young, my father used to come up from the city and work on that farm. I said, the only thing that I know that those people would have possibly done was they raised farm animals. And that's to the extent of it. My problem is, I worry about that air going up in there. I don't care what anybody says. You fellas are great, and you just want to push what you want to do. But I'm concerned about the airflow. It's just like Limerick Generating Station. I worked up there for 30-some years. I think it's safe. But they got a evacuation plan. They got all kinds of stuff that's going on. What I didn't like to hear tonight was the fact that if there's a problem with this underlayment or whatever, it goes to the, what was that authority of the what?
DEP.
Not the DEP,
Oh,
but
the homeowners.
the Homeowners Association.
Right.
That's a heck of a price if something happens.
Right.
These poor people that move into this area here, they got to be educated that they know that they're going to be responsible for that. And I think there's going to be a lack of that. And I don't care who does what. But I comment you on what you're doing, and I'm hoping that you're looking out for our residences. And I'm in the process of hiring somebody else to do my DEP work, because I don't trust what they're getting. I'm finished with that. I'd like to say one comment. I want to congratulate Nancy McFarland and her staff. I'm going to say the older staff, but I don't mean it like that, in helping Lower Providence what they did on Vincent Drive with the old Reese Weaver property. I salute you for what you did and what the township has fought. We would have been in a real mess if that would have gone the other way, and you guys know what it was like. And I thank you for all that you have done. Thank you, everybody. I
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
it.
Just very quickly, as the board is aware, the environmental concerns that the gentleman had are real. They're going on right now. We're coming in and putting a cap on it and taking care of everything. So his concerns are very real, but we're not ignoring it. We're the ones coming in to try to fix it.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the public? Mr. Borai.
Hi, Deb. Tom Borai, 5 Brenda Lane, Audubon. You were all young pups when the DEP happened up there at Superior 2. That was my first year as a supervisor. My concern lies with who's going to be telling these people that's moving in that there is a problem with the ground. Is it going to be the builder, or is it going to be the realtor? Now, if you can recall, back when the dump was in and the houses were built up where the dumps were, the people were telling the people on what was there was the realtor, it wasn't the builder. I mean, we had tales that it was a ski slope. We had tales it was everything. People are realizing today what that thing is. The highest hazardous duty dump in the state. Matter of fact, probably in the country. So I'd like to know who is going to be letting the people know. Is it going to be the realtor, or is it going to be the builder? Yes, Mr. Rice.
The plan is, and we've discussed this with the applicant and their counsel, and the board's aware of this, the staff's aware of this. What is going to happen, first of all, there's 2 more steps. Tonight is the ordinance, legislative. They will then have to file a conditional use application, come in front of this board in a hearing, present more testimony, be subject to more questions, and they can file also a land development plan either simultaneously or after they get that decision. So there's those steps just in terms of procedurally where we're heading. What the township intends to do, and the township doesn't have any regulations that require this, but they've agreed to make sure that every resident, and the way this would work is we were going to draft a disclosure statement, and it will say whatever it has to say to disclose what the existing conditions are, what the past conditions have been, where the status of the Act 2 clearance is. it's groundwater, it's soil contamination. So all of that will be disclosed. We're also going to disclose where the wetlands are. And we're to disclose any natural features or any other easements which might impact any of those lots. We're going to tell them where the open space is, so they don't put their swing set on it or whatever else they may want to put on it that they're not permitted to do. So a lot of those details will get set up during the land development process, and it'll be on the plan. But as you know, people buy new homes, they get a lot of papers, they don't usually read them. So we're going to require that when they sign an agreement of sale, that that property owner also has to sign a disclosure. And there'll be no building permits and no COs until we get a written disclosure form by every individual property owner telling us that they know the conditions of the real estate that they're buying. Because the worst thing is 10 years from now, a group of residents coming in here and telling this board or some future board, we didn't know what we were buying. Nobody told us that this was an industrial site. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that every single property owner, so to answer your question, we're going to set up a mechanism that guarantees that every property owner signs off on a disclosure statement, or they're not going to be able to proceed with building.
And Mr. Borai, not only that they're aware of what the conditions are, but their legal obligations for the homeowners as a member of the homeowners association should future problems be found if that need to be remedied. Because I think that's the biggest thing, right? That you know, what was mentioned before, that if 15 years down the road, once the homeowners association has responsibility for this, that they will be on, as a member of the homeowners association, that they'll be on the hook. And I think that's the important part, one of the big important parts for that disclosure.
Mr. Duffy, I understand that, but you know, a buck is a buck. And I think that the realtor should be put on notice too, whoever the realtor is, that they have to disclose right at the time that that person comes in to look at that property, that there is maybe possibility could be a problem. Possibility could be a problem.
I don't want to see possibility. I think that they should be warned that there is a problem and that they're buying a house on a contaminated site, and then what their possible future obligations are. Not that there's possibly a problem, there is a problem there.
Well,
And they're trying to fix it, and they're trying to do the best they can, but, you know, this is an opportunity to educate potential buyers. Not just a possible problem, but there is a problem.
Well, I'm not going to give my age away, Mr. Duffy, but you know, I can remember when the fans were up there too, and they were blowing to get the stuff to dissipate up in the air. So, you know, it's a lot of people have some concern. Plus the fact, you know, DEP, you keep hearing about DEP. When I was on the board my first term in the 70s, you know, those people from DEP aren't around anymore. You got young kids probably sitting in there now trying to say, okay, fine, this is great, this is great. The guys that were on top of the thing at the time, they're probably not around. They're probably retired like I am. But other than that, other than the gentleman mentioned the question about traffic too, I think in the past, and you folks are doing the same thing, that we always had a police backup report from our traffic people and everything else, and I'm sure that you're following through with that also. Right, Mr. Chairman?
They'll be part of the traffic impact study.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to say one other thing too. You know, Nancy got 60 years with this township, and sitting right next to her is another ex-supervisor that has just as much time. So there are three of us that go back in time, and thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Borer. Yes, sir.
My name is Greg Smith, and I live on Collegeville Road. Did you say that there were going to be 10% impervious surface in that development?
Yeah, I think so. Building coverage, I think that's it.
Well, the impervious, does it include the areas that are capped? We're going to cap part of it.
Pervious is 35%.
That's what he said he was allowed, but he
That's
said
the
he was only,
maximum. Yeah, that's
he
the
said he was
maximum.
going to only use 10%.
24%. 24% impervious, building coverage is 10%.
Okay, and the rest of it's roads?
No, sir, impervious includes the roads and the houses, driveways,
Yeah.
Anything that water can't penetrate.
Okay, so you're saying it's 24% total.
24%, yes, sir.
Does that include the area that's capped?
No, sir.
The cap
It's
is
capped
not a...
soil.
Yeah, it's a 2-foot cap of soil, not a...
Oh, it's not impervious?
It's not impervious, no.
Okay. Okay, that's all I had.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, while still in the public hearing, we have item 3C, consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 106, Parks, Section 106-5, to delete any local regulation of firearms and to bring the township's code into compliance with the Pennsylvania Uniform Firearms Act. Mr. Rice.
Okay. Again, this is an ordinance that has been advertised for public hearing tonight. This is an amendment to Chapter 106 of the Township's Park Regulations Ordinance. Essentially, and I think there's been a fair amount of press regarding an action that the state legislature took last year, amending the Uniform Firearms Act, and more specifically, because it already prohibited any local firearms regulation, but more specifically prohibiting it, and also creating a special right to sue municipalities, where before you had to prove standing, you had to prove somehow you were injured. The legislature, in their extreme wisdom, decided to create a special standing for a plaintiff. So anyone that's in an organization, would have the right, whether they're a resident, whether they're impacted by the regulations or not, has the right to file a suit. So what and this has been discussed previously when the board authorized this, essentially what we've done with the ordinance is we still have some continuing regulations, except any regulation of firearms are prohibited. That's consistent with the Uniform Firearms Act and/or the Game and Wildlife Code. We're referencing that any firearms or any hunting is solely regulated under those two statutes. So there's no question that Lower Providence is not stepping over the line as it exists today in terms of both of those state acts. It's pretty straightforward. We're bringing it into compliance, in my view, with the Firearms Act. There's been a request that we do that, as there has been with a lot of municipalities that have these regulations on the books. So it's been advertised tonight. I don't know if the board has any questions on this. It's fairly straightforward.
Questions from the board? Questions from the audience? Okay, anything additional, Mr. Rice?
I have nothing else.
At this time, I would ask for a motion to close the public hearing and re-enter into the public meeting. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. We are now back in the regular public meeting. Next on the agenda, item 4A, ordinances. Consideration of an ordinance amending Section 143-8, zoning map of Lower Providence Township, rezoning 2 separate parcels to R3 Residential District. Mr. Rice.
We've had the public hearing on this. Unless there's any further questions, what's before the board is adoption of the proposed zoning map amendment. And with the, as Mr. Garrity explained, the rezoning of the 2 tracts of ground to R3 Residential District.
Do I hear a motion to amend Section 143-8, zoning map of Lower Providence Township?
I would make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll make a second.
Motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? Yes, sir. Mr. Opperman?
I still wish they would consider redoing the roads before they go ahead with all this stuff.
Absolutely. And to answer that, that will still happen. That's only a proposed architectural rendering. While I've been sitting up here, I've had an opportunity to take a look at the schematic you drew up. I can get you some additional information that we have on where the state has considered a proposed second bridge also, and I assure you that will be part of the entire process.
I just had one comment. While I admire WB Homes and I admire their product and their professionalism, I am against high-density housing at this end of the township. I do intend to support this zoning change, though, because it's our chance to bring a troubled lot into compliance with DEP, and I believe it's our best chance to do that. I want to get that on the record.
Okay, any additional comments? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4B, consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 143 of the Code of Lower Providence Township, providing for redevelopment of industrial sites permitting townhouse uses within the I Industrial District by conditional use.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Just a brief comment. This again, we've had the hearing on this. This is an amendment to Section 143-133D, providing for townhouse uses by conditional use. And as I said during the public hearing, this is the first step, the legislative step in advance, if the board adopts this, of the conditional use in the land development process.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Do I hear a motion to amend Chapter 143 of the Code of Lower Providence Township as stated?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Questions or comments? I guess I'll start. We're not there yet. Assuming this passes and we move forward, we have other steps to follow. At that time, I'd like to talk further about the architectural renderings. I can tell you that one of my other concerns would be when we're talking about high-density housing is certainly safety. So I'd like you to come back when we get to that part of the process prepared to talk about communal walls, firewalls, and safety standards. Other questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 4C, consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 106 Parks, Section 106-5, to delete any local regulation of firearms and to bring the Township's code into compliance with the Pennsylvania Uniform Firearms Act. Mr. Rice.
Not much else to say on this. This is a sort of a cleanup item that was that's required under the state legislation that was enacted at the end of last year. So it's been advertised in accordance with the second-class township code, and it's ready for board action.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Any questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
You need a motion.
You need
a Oh.
motion. You jumped right.
Sorry. I'm 10 steps ahead. Do I have a motion to amend the ordinance, or to amend Chapter 106 of Park Section 106-5?
I'll make that motion so that we bring our ordinances up to compliance with state law.
Thank you very much. And a second.
I'll second with the caveat that, I mean, I'm not thrilled that we have to change our rules to allow firearms in township parks, but if we don't, the township can get sued. So I don't think we have any choice because of what the legislature did to us.
Very important for our residents to understand that it's the state legislature that imposed that. Now, properly having received a motion and a second, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 5A, new business, discussion and consideration of collective bargaining agreement with the Lower Providence Police Officers Association. Assistant Manager, Ms. Golis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The information that the board has in their packet, the new contract that's being proposed, as well as my memo recapping the main changes. I mean, they're about 2.5 pages long. What I'd like to do is recap the key points that I think most people are interested in. However, more than willing and able to go over the finer details. And basically, it was a very successful negotiation process. It was lengthy, but we got to this point, and I think everyone is fairly satisfied with the end product. The compensation, this is a 4-year contract covering years 2015 through 2018. It will be retroactive back to January 1st of this year if the board does approve it this evening. The wage increase for the police officers in 2015 and 16 is set at 3% in each of the years. 2017, it is at 3.25%, and in year 2018, the final year of the contract, at 3.5%. Longevity pay has been increased. Currently, prior to January 1st, the rate is $750 payable to the police officer for every 5 years of service. That will now be increased to $1,000 for every 5 years of service. Beginning at 5 years, be $1,000, and at 35 years, of course, I don't have that written down. Okay. The longevity has increased, though, for the 5 years of continuous service. Retirement and pension, this is something that the police officers will be increasing their contribution. Through December 31st of 2014, they were contributing 2% of their gross wages to their pension plan. The 2015 and 2016, it will remain at 2%. In 2017, their contribution rate will increase to 3% and will remain at 3% for 2018 to finish out the 4-year contract period. The continuing education incentive, that is for officers who have an advanced degree, such as an associate's or a bachelor's or a master's. The incentive for the associate's degree was increased from $350 annually to $500. The bachelor's degree incentive was increased from $400 to $750 annually. And for a master's degree, it was increased from $600 to $1,000 annually. In addition to the increases for each category, there was a new category created, and that is one for an honorable military discharge, and that annual benefit incentive is $500. Another new category that was added is tuition reimbursement. The township will fund an annual pool in the amount of $12,000 for the entire police department. That is not per individual police officer. That is an amount that needs to be split among all officers interested in tuition reimbursement. And that will be the officers taking advantage of that will be presented by the Police Officers Association themselves. That will be up to the police officers to determine who is going to be receiving that, not for the township administration staff to mete out any money. And there are key areas that the officers need to abide by if they want to take advantage of the tuition reimbursement. Would you like me to read any of those?
No, it's okay.
Okay. And there were some other items, as many of you are aware of, but they had to do with scheduling and the chief's ability to schedule certain events, uniform allowances, when cleaning allowances are paid, prorated amounts, canine compensation. We have a lot of more minor details that are outlined, and I'm more than willing, if anyone has any questions or would like those detailed, I can go over those. They're all in the memo here.
No, I don't think we need to go through them. I would just echo what you said. It was a long but highly productive process. It was a true negotiation with give and take on both sides.
I think, Jerry, the one thing that I don't think you went over that's important is that the negotiating team was able to get a concession from the police officers where they're increasing their health insurance contribution.
They are, and let me go over the two concessions. They are currently increasing their monthly contribution from $20 to $60 per month, and that will be retroactive to January 1st. In addition to that, as far as a concession, the survivor benefit for anyone killed in the line of service will now not be, the township will no longer have an exposure out of their pension plan, the police pension plan. that will now be fully funded by the state as per Act 51 that was passed in 2009, that updated Act 600. So I would hope and pray we never have to realize any savings that we would see on an actuarial study, but it is no longer a concern that the township has to insure part of that survivor benefit through a private insurance policy, somewhere between $7,000 and $8,000 a year, depending on the year, as well as an ongoing survivor benefit that would be paid to a surviving spouse.
Thank you. To continue, we have a Superior Police Department with dedicated officers who honorably serve the residents of Lower Providence. The Board of Supervisors is committed to ensuring they are fairly compensated. I believe this agreement creates a delicate balance between that fair compensation and remaining fiscally responsible. I'd like to publicly thank Sergeant Bill Hopkins and Officers Matt Kunert and Pete Fleming, who's here tonight in the back of the room, for their dedication to the negotiation process and their pragmatic and collaborative work. It was a true pleasure to work with these gentlemen. I'd also like to thank Supervisor Duffy, who worked together with me during this process, as well as Manager Rich Gestrick and Assistant Manager Jerry Golis. And I believe that this is a fair and good agreement, and I'd like to thank the members of the Police Officers Association for their affirmative vote on the contract, and I'd recommend that we approve this tonight.
Thank you, Jason. I just have to say, the negotiating team on both sides, I know, put a tremendous amount of effort into coming up with an agreement rather than going to arbitration and spending, a considerable amount of legal fees. So we are very happy that an agreement has brought in front of us. I do have one question. I think it's important, maybe Jerry, you might have these figures, or Rich, that the residents understand the savings that the township will see with the increase in contributions to the pension and the health care. Because the percentage increments might seem small, but when you add them up, they are large savings to our budget. Do you have those with you, Rich?
I didn't bring that with me tonight, but what Colleen is referring to is that the police officers are going to be increasing their contribution to the plan this year in terms of the health plan. They're also going to be, in terms of their pension contributions, had topped out at 2%. They're going to top out at 3%. So I think it's an extremely fair agreement. There was a great deal of time that was put into this agreement. I want to thank everybody on our negotiating team, the chairman. I want to thank Patrick, and I want to thank Jerry. All the agreements that we did this year, and it took us about 10 negotiating sessions, maybe 11, to finally reach an agreement. They all were pointed towards bringing towards fairness between the township's position and the collective bargaining agency's position. So I think for the first time, whether it's the public works contract, whether it's a police contract, that all sides were treated fairly, and there's parity amongst almost all the employee groups for the first time. And I want to thank the police. Pete, I know you're in the back there. You put in 11 meetings with us as well. The negotiation sessions were conducted extremely professionally. There wasn't any agitation between the two sides, even despite the prolonged negotiations. At all times, it maintained a very professional atmosphere. And I think it's a really good contract that the board's about to consider. Yeah, now we've provided those types of financial information all along. I just didn't bring it with me tonight. We've done PowerPoint after PowerPoint in executive session, but I didn't bring it with me.
I'm sorry, I thought you had that in your pocket at all times. Could you maybe supply that information to Carl so that the newspapers could have accurate figures.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'll call for a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement with the Lower Providence Police Officers Association.
I'll make that motion to accept the collective bargaining agreement in front of us.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Excuse me. Motion and a second. Any questions or comments additionally from the board? From the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you again, Pete. We've already gone through 5B on the agenda, so we will move to 5C. Authorization to seek financing proposals for pickup truck and chipper. Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you recall back in 2014 when we began working on the 2015 operating budget, staff also put together a 5-year capital plan. During that process, it was determined that we had a few pieces of equipment that would need replacing on a rather quick basis. One of those is a year 2000 dump truck that has 73,000 miles. May not seem like much for your private vehicle, but these are really heavy-duty work and wear and tear miles that have been on this dump truck, and it has substantial body rust. And the other item is a wood chipper. We have a 1988 wood chipper, not up to the safety standards it needs to be to begin with, but does not accommodate the large diameter of branches and shrubs that we would like it to, and also in very bad shape. I'm going to right now pass the mic over to our Public Works Director. He can speak on the technical specifications, and then he'll gladly hand it back to me to speak on the financing again.
Thank you. That's correct. We have a 1988 chipper. It's a smaller unit. It's basically tired. It has a small engine, a small feeder box. The new unit is a much bigger engine, a much bigger feeder box, and we will be able to process material much quicker when we have it out in the field. Also, we want to replace a 2000 350 dump truck with a new 550 heavy-duty dump truck with a larger plow, and also this vehicle will be able to spread salt. The older truck is not capable of doing that, and we will also have a lift gate on the back. Another key item in this is it's going to have a crew cab with 4 doors, so it can carry a public works crew of 4 people out to the job site, so that'll cut down on using other vehicles. We can take out 1 vehicle instead of 2, and that's a 4-door unit. And basically that's it. Any questions?
Jerry, I know you're going to mention financing, but can you also just briefly explain the benefits of the CoStars program?
Well, the CoStars is a program that the state negotiates for the best prices, and we as a municipality are permitted by law to piggyback onto those pre-negotiated prices without having to go through our own bidding process, because the state has already taken care of it for us. And they have specified various vendors for different products, whether it's computers, vehicles, building supplies, and that as long as we use one of those authorized vendors, it's a quite simple purchase on our end. And that's what we plan on doing with these items also. As far as financing these 2 items, they would qualify to be paid for out of our liquid fuels allotments, our Fund 35, if you will. And Rich had done a basic amortization schedule based on a 4% interest rate, which we think would be extremely high for any financing on these 2 items. But that would make create an annual payment of $19,100. We're aware of some financial institutions that are currently offering an interest rate in the 2.6% range, bringing that annual payment down closer to $15,000. So that $19,100 that's in the memo would be worst case scenario on that. But the goal is to secure a 10-year term for these assets. You can see we have a 1988 chipper, and the one we're getting is substantially more heavy duty. And then the Ford F-550s typically have a 20-year lifespan with our township. The one we're replacing is a 350, so it did not last. We didn't expect it to last a full 20 years on that. But this way we could, with a 10-year lease term or loan term, we could take advantage of the increased liquid fuels allotments that we're expecting going forward. And I believe the board was made aware of about 2 weeks ago, we did receive our allotment, and it came in about $19,765 higher than we had budgeted for liquid fuels for 2015. Originally, when we received what we thought was excellent news in 2014 that we would have much higher allotments for 15 through 18, then the state backed it out, and then when so we created our budget accordingly and dropped in $596,000 in allotments for 2015. So the good news that we received last week, they upped that number again. Very glad to know that, but that $19,700 would more than cover the high end of it financing on this. Additionally, our Public Works Director was able to renegotiate a better price for replacing the salt storage shed. Part of the 5-year capital plan, we're anticipating building that and likely financing it in year 2017. But that decreased by $76,000. So that would be in our long-term 5-year plan, would free up additional liquid fuels allotments to pay for these 2 pieces of equipment we're asking for authorization for tonight. Third item is our solicitor has recently provided an opinion that old developer in lieu of fees that we had received over the years and had incorrectly posted as escrow were really not escrow. They were simply contributions and thus could be added, transferred to our capital fund. The goal here is to use them for capital projects, but infrastructure projects. Again, we can use that for gun-eyeting projects that we have earmarked in 2015 and 2016. We were going to use liquid fuels money for those 2, but we can now use these old developer in lieu of fees. So in the last few weeks, we've had a few different pieces of the puzzle come together in a positive way, freeing up liquid fuels money to be used for other items. So this is where we're going with the funding for these projects. So this evening, staff is asking for authorization to pursue quotes for financing from various financial institutions, provide an analysis to the board, and bring it back at a future meeting for final authorization to actually purchase anything.
Thank you, Jerry. Any additional questions or comments?
Rich, financially, we're looking a little better than what we were presented at the budget meeting, correct?
Oh, at the end of 2014, we finished $499,000 to the good. We finished with a surplus. So, but this particular expenditure is not contingent upon that. This was an expenditure that we budgeted for in the 5-year budget. It really, because we anticipated financing it, it really doesn't hit until 2016. We put it on hold. If you recall, when I gave you the PowerPoint presentation the last time, I said, just as Jerry had outlined, that the liquid fuels allotment that they had allocated to us or estimated had dropped by like 50,000. And I said, well, we're going to pull back to what their new figure is in terms of our budget. I said, but we're going to wait until we actually get the liquid fuels allotment in 2015 before we make a decision as to whether or not we're going to finance this. So that's exactly what we did. We waited, and that's why we gave you the report tonight. But in the process, just as she outlined, we also went back and we refigured a whole slew of other items, including the $120,000 that we're able now to put into the capital fund. We had 2 gun-eye projects that we were looking to finance at a cost $18,400 apiece. And both of those projects we're now looking to fund directly out of the capital fund. So that relieved pressure, and as she said, we also got I insisted on another quote on the salt shed addition, and as a result of that, we probably saved $60,000, $70,000. So, yeah, you're in a very good position to do exactly what we planned to do before the state had said, oh, well, you have 50,000 less, than what we anticipated.
Thank you, Rich. I also know that we had discussions about replacing the manager's vehicle and the lieutenant's
Yes.
vehicle. Is it worth considering all four of these together in one motion, or should they, I know that doesn't appear on the agenda, but it's become a timely need.
Sure. What we've got is a request, we had deferred both the manager's vehicle and the lieutenant's vehicle until the year 2016. The manager's vehicle has 139,500 miles on it. In terms of repairs, it's currently burning transmission fluid, and it has a rear axle problem, and its anticipated lifespan is about 3 to 4 months. The other vehicle, the lieutenant's vehicle, is a 2006 Dodge Charger. It's got 93,000 miles on it. It's got some issues with the front end steering. The trade-in value on my vehicle, on the manager's vehicle, we estimate between $2,500 and $5,000. Trade-in value on the Dodge, which is the lieutenant's vehicle, we estimate $5,000 to $7,000. In the budget, we had estimated that these two vehicles would cost approximately $30,000 apiece to replace. So what I would request is that you authorize a supplemental appropriation from the general fund in the total amount of $60,000 for this year, as opposed to deferring these two vehicles to 2016. Now you do, to answer the other question, you do, because we finished the year with $499,000 surplus in the general fund, you do have the ability to do this year.
So those should be taken separately, or can this be considered as one motion?
You can do you want to do two motions?
I think we can do it separately, because if you're
Okay.
going to allot this out of the general fund, we'll not need to go out for financing, and I'm
Sure.
requesting that we're authorized to pursue financing for the
Sure.
two larger items.
Okay.
Okay, so let's take that first. Is there a motion to authorize our staff to seek financing proposals for the replacement pickup truck and chipper?
I would make that motion.
Is there a second? Motion and a second. Any other questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. And the next item up would be the replacement of the manager's vehicle and the lieutenant's vehicle. And we would be seeking $60,000 from the general fund to do that. Is there a motion to do that?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
This one's just.
Second.
Motion and a second. Questions or comments from the board?
I think it's just important to note that we put off replacing the lieutenant's vehicle last year, and we did not consider the manager's vehicle, but it is literally falling apart. And so that's why we're discussing this at this point, right? Your
Yes.
pieces are falling off.
Oh, yeah, during the recent freeze, I went out to my truck, and I pulled on the driver's side handle, and it broke off. And then I went around the back to the passenger side, pulled on that handle, and it also broke off. So then I opened the hatch on the back of the vehicle, crawled up, and did some surfing to the,
Sounds like Dukes
I'm getting
of
a little
Hazzard.
old for that surfing routine.
Lieutenant, I see you're here tonight for the police chief. Just no racing stripes or anything on your car.
But Rich, you also have mechanical issues with it as well?
Yeah, the transmission, I noticed one night when I was pulling out onto Ridge, I thought somebody had struck me from behind, and I looked in my rearview mirror. Well, the closest guy, was several hundred yards away. And so whenever I brought it into the mechanic for the door handles, I said, I explained that was what was going on. Well, and whenever it goes up a hill, and I thought it was the lifters, it will hesitate, stutter and hesitate. So he took a look at it and he said, the transmission fluid is burning. And I said, well, can you just replace that? And he said, no, if you did that, you probably only get another 2 or 3 weeks out of it. So they've also looking at the rear axle as well, but we've just decided that in terms of repairs, the repairs are going to be like $3,500, and the resale price of this vehicle is anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000.
Thank you, Rich. We have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on, item 6A, old business, discussion and consideration of preliminary final plan approval for LD 14-04 Taco Bell. Mike Mrzinski.
Good evening, thank you. The folks from Taco Bell who are looking to develop the property at Trooper and Audubon have been before you about a month or so ago. We believe that most of the issues have been resolved, and Mr. Hall here is representing the applicant to answer any further questions. I believe a resolution has been prepared, and if we'd like to run through that, and then Mr. Hall can answer any questions that the board or the audience may have.
I can address quickly or briefly the resolution. What's in front of you is preliminary final plan approval resolution. Taco Bell is proposing a 2,715 square foot restaurant, 27 parking spaces, and a drive-through lane. The lot's about 40,000 square feet. You have review letters. The resolution basically incorporates Mr. Woodrow's review letter of January 13th. You have a McMahon review letter of January 19th, 2015. And there's some conditions embedded in the McMahon review letter in terms of traffic. I think you're still dealing with PennDOT on some of those issues, correct?
Right. The application has been submitted to PennDOT. And with the condition of 2A, which has states that we should provide a concrete island at the entrance to Trooper Road, we would like to defer that to PennDOT. It is within the right-of-way of Trooper Road, so it is in the jurisdiction of PennDOT. So,
well, I think there's two options there, and that's out of McMahon's review letter.
Right.
So it's either that or pavement markings, but ultimately PennDOT's going to make that determination.
Right.
The other parts of the condition under paragraph 2, since there is a possibility that the plan may change, Taco Bell is going to keep the township's traffic engineer in the loop on this, correct?
Most definitely, yes.
So when there's meetings or correspondence or anything, the township's traffic engineer will be invited?
He would be copied or invited to any meeting, yes.
So the other review letter that you have, the consultant letter, is the committal letter of January 8th, 2015. And are there any issues with that letter?
No.
And then the resolution in paragraph 4 has the various saldo waivers under paragraph 4A through F. And there is an additional waiver in paragraph 5 regarding the lighting ordinance and some relief from the Chapter 105 that deals with permitting lighting in excess of 0.5 foot candles at the public right-of-way.
Right.
So that's briefly what's in front of the board. I don't know whether the board has questions or, I don't know, Mike, is there any other issues on
No,
this
I
plan?
believe that everything else has been worked out.
Do the waivers need to be taken separately?
Yes. Well, I mean, if what I would do, unless there's some objection regarding any of the waivers, you can certainly vote on them all at once.
Okay.
If you want to pull one or two of them out and discuss them separately, that's up to the board.
Well, the one waiver I had a question about was, I mean, the way it's listed in the plan is waiver from providing 8-foot tall evergreen trees, but it doesn't actually state the lower limit. So we're still providing trees, they just don't have to be 8 foot at the time that you're putting them in, correct?
Right.
So I think the waiver should read, you know, that they're at least a certain height.
What is proposed?
6 foot.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Questions or comments from the board before we move forward? Okay, so let's begin by taking the waivers. We can take waivers for A, B, C, E, F, and 5 collectively, unless there's any objection.
No objection.
Do I hear a motion to approve those waivers as listed?
I'll make that motion to approve those 6 waivers. Right, can I count right?
Yes. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Again, that's waivers for A, B, C, E, F, and 5, which would be providing soil test holes, providing profiles of proposed sanitary and storm utilities, providing the minimum curb radius of 15 feet, allowing radii less than 5 feet from providing stormwater management facilities, and permitting lighting in excess of 0.5-foot candles at the public right-of-way line and property line of a non-residential property. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion amongst the board? Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And now we'll take waiver 4D separately. That waiver would be from providing 8-foot tall evergreen trees, and a suggestion has been made that that 8-foot tall be changed to 6 feet tall. Do I hear a motion?
I would make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All of those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And then to return to the agenda, is there a motion for preliminary and final plan approval for LD 14-04 Taco Bell?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any additional questions or comments from the board? From the public? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 6B on the agenda, discussion and consideration of preliminary final plan approval for LD 14-02 McDonald's. Again, to Mike.
Thank you again. This matter has also been before the board. There were some considerations to clean up some review letter comments. This is basically for remodeling both interior and exterior of the existing McDonald's down on Trooper Road. Primary concern was the double drive aisle and the traffic flow through the shopping center and into the access ways. Most issues have been resolved now with the consultants and the working with the applicant. Really, at this point, we're down to, I believe, one outstanding issue, which is the the signage at the access coming out of the drive aisle into the shopping center access way. And even though that is private property, that is something that several consultants, including our police department, did raise issues about. So that's about the, as I recall, that's the main issue that's still outstanding. And I'm sorry, Attorney Carl Weiner is here representing the applicant.
Thank you. As Mike said, this is a remodel of this site. We have the review letter from McMahon. We have cleaned up the internal circulation issues based on the revised plans that were submitted. McMahon suggests some additional placards on the stop signs just so drivers are aware that it's a two-way stop. We are fine with that recommendation. And that's really the only outstanding comment that I'm aware of on the McMahon letter. On the TCA letter, all of the landscaping issues have been resolved. TCA also recommended certain external, or I would say off-site and on-site crosswalks. The off-site crosswalks really are not feasible, and our engineer can explain that in a little more detail. Internally, if crosswalks should be added to help direct pedestrians through the drive-through to the building, we are willing to do that.
So do you want to address the McMahon letter only has the one issue in it, and you're going to do the placards in lieu of the other alternative that's in their letter?
Yeah, Michael Jagner with Bow Engineering on behalf of the applicant. The final comment from McMahon, we've worked hand in hand regarding majority of the comments. They're suggesting that at the exit lane of the rear of the McDonald's, that within that drive aisle, that an additional stop bar and stop sign be placed to create a kind of a three-way intersection. And we're fine with putting in that additional sign in order to help to further promote the controlling of that traffic. As for the TCA comment, in their most recent review letter, comment 4, they note that they suggest that crosswalk could be particularly beneficial where pedestrians would be crossing the drive-through lanes, which would suggest that we're talking about internal crosswalks where the parking is by the McDonald's and getting people directed towards the internal McDonald's sidewalk. We can do that, and that is something that we can propose on the final plan prior to recording, and we can work with TCA regarding that item.
Do you have a copy of the plan that shows where those locations are?
I approach?
Sure. So crosswalks, how many of them are there, and where would they be?
The idea of the crosswalks would be to kind of direct some of the patrons parking on the adjacent of the parking area of McDonald's towards where the sidewalk is, where the main entrance was. Same thing over here, maybe directing them across with some crosswalks in that location. The entrance ways of the McDonald's are in this location here.
They're going to remain the same in the remodel?
Absolutely. Do you plan to stay open during all of this work?
Yes, the remodeling of the outside can take place while the restaurant is still operational, and with the drive-through may be shut down for a short period of time while they perfect the drive-through.
Thank you.
So this would come back to you with, in a preliminary final resolution form with whatever outstanding conditions are left. Is there anything else, Mr. Lee? It's pretty straightforward at this point, I guess.
Yeah, there's nothing else left.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have anything else. I mean, tonight is just, I don't know if the board, if there's any other issues.
Can it really be voted on then, or if we have outstanding items?
You can vote on it. I mean, they would be conditions.
Okay.
You know, I know you were in front of the board several months ago, and
Right.
you know, this is a revised plan at this point. So, I mean, I would prefer that you have a written resolution in front of you with everything you talked about tonight. So that would be back to you at your first meeting in April. Preliminary
That's April
final.
1st.
Right, April 1st.
Well, this is our second trip here
Mhm.
on a remodel, and we're not really changing anything on this site other than, putting up a new building. We are adding the drive-through lane. We have addressed all of the traffic, internal traffic issues. We've addressed all the TCA issues. These issues that are outstanding are relatively minor. and
So can
we've agreed
approval
to
be
them.
conditioned upon acceptance of the revised items as noted?
Well, the board could certainly vote on it without the written resolution, but I just want to clarify with Mike that there's nothing not in his memo or in his memo that needs to be called out. Right now, what I have is the motion would be preliminary final, would be compliance with the McMahon March 11th, 2015 review letter, the committee March 11th, 2015 review letter, the suburban lighting October 10th, 2014 letter. Mr. Woodrow, I don't see a
Mr. Rice, yes, I didn't have any site development issues from an engineering perspective, drainage or
Okay, so there's
whatever,
no-
other than what McMahon had picked up.
There is some correspondence here from the police department. Which I'm not sure how that's been addressed. Has that been addressed?
Yeah, I believe that is coincides with the McMahon, and I guess in a sense also TCA's comments about the signage.
The signage, yeah.
at the intersection.
Okay. So you have that, and then you have whatever the park and rec fees are required, and then compliance with all other, applicable ordinances, and execution of development agreements, the usual boilerplate conditions. So they would be your list. The board's inclined, wants to vote on that, go for it.
What's the pleasure of the board? Is there a motion for preliminary final plan approval for LD 14-02 McDonald's, conditioned upon acceptance of all the review items as stated by Mr. Rice? We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any additional questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion
Thank you.
carries.
Thank you for your
Thank you very
time.
much. Okay, moving right along, we have some announcements. Planning Commission has a meeting coming up on the 25th of the month at 7:30, follow the following evening, the 26th, with a meeting of the Zoning Hearing Board, also at 7:30. Mike?
Yeah, just in brief, the Planning Commission will be finally, I believe, considering the Sycamore Farms lot line change that is ready to go. There will also be a presentation by Tier-Point, which is down in the industrial part. I believe it's 1,000 Adams. They are doing a multi-phase development project. This isn't that, but what this is they need a storage structure, 3,200 square feet, that we just want to have the board take a look at sort of as a auxiliary project ahead of their phase that they will be proposing to bring forth to use shortly. So that's on the agenda. The commission will also be considering the recreation overlay, which will be a second conversation with them. They had commented on, Mr. Rice's office has done some revision, largely in answer to that, and also to the electronic sign ordinance change. And so the Planning Commission will be hearing the revision to that as well. And that's next Wednesday. Next Thursday, the only issue is the board's deliberation on the cell tower on Level Road. It was an extensive hearing the previous month. The record has been closed at this point, so it's really just the board's deliberation to to be taking place, and that should be a shorter meeting next Thursday night.
Thank you, Mike, and I believe we have the wrong time in our agenda. It's 7 o'clock, not 7:30. We have the annual Easter egg hunt coming up this Saturday, March 21st at 10 a.m. in Eagleville Park. We look forward to having many of our residents come out. The 21st is a busy day because that evening we also have the annual spring wine tasting at our Lower Providence Library, and we look forward to having many of our residents there as well. And by way of one final announcement, many of you have noticed that the four-way intersection is up at Eagleville, Pinetown, and Sunnyside. We've attempted to get information out about that. We've addressed that at previous meetings. However, we have continued to receive some discussion and correspondence from residents about that. There are plans for future road markings to further indicate that those are coming up. We have attempted to have signage out there. We've also had enforcement by our police officers out there as well, so I would like the residents to know that we are on top of that. It did come in quite literally in the middle of the night. PennDOT had assured us it was coming in the spring, and instead it was placed on a winter evening at 3 in the morning. So we are continuing to make those changes. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I just wanted the opportunity to reiterate about the wine tasting. It's going to be a perfectly horrible day tomorrow, but Saturday is going to be beautiful. And we hope you all come out. $45, you can still get your tickets in advance. If you wait and get 2 tickets.
I have 2 tickets like yourself.
There you go. If you wait and get them at the door, it's $50, so there you go. And we are going to have a large screen for viewing of the basketball championships, so you won't miss a thing.
Go Villanova.
Won't miss a thing. You can sit back with a glass of wine and support the library and cheer on your team. So I hope everybody comes out. It's always a wonderful time. Good food and the wine. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from staff or our solicitor?
I have a question for Lieutenant Turtle. Stan, have you received a schedule from PennDOT as to the pavement markings preceding the four-way stop at Eagleville and Pinetown?
An exact schedule, no. The issue being the cold weather, and tomorrow the snow is going to delay that again. So they are aware of it. They have told us they will get to it as soon as the weather breaks. It needs to be a certain temperature. John could probably give me the answer to that, but it's been too cold to get the torch markings down, and they have problems with some of the additional signs because of the freeze. They couldn't get the signs placed. So there still are signs waiting to be placed, additional roadway markings. Like it was indicated, we are trying to do some education down there. The traffic unit alone has done over 21 hours of enforcement time, not to mention the zone cars. So we are stopping, and for the time being, we are just letting people know that there's a stop sign there. There's no active enforcement being taken place other than notifying them right now.
Thank you.
Lieutenant, how about traffic accidents down there? I'm hoping that the
We've
stop
had one since the signs have been installed, and it was a very minor crash. And it was a north-south car going through the stop sign. And I will say this, most of the violations we're encountering are residents who have been traveling that road for a number of years who are just accustomed to not stopping. Pretty much everybody we stopped has said that, I've lived here forever, didn't know there was a sign there. That's why we're doing the education component, letting them know this sign is there.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from board or staff or comments?
I just have one. The Park and Rec Committee had they didn't really hold a meeting. They didn't have enough members present, but they had some discussion that was on on the 10th of March. They're currently planning a spring park tour for the members. That's something that they do annually, and they go out and sort of do the quick inspections. Any new park members get to see what kind of facilities that the township has, and then they also look at reviewing their 5-year plan and any projects that they'd like to have completed in the near future. So that's coming up. And the egg hunt. And if there's a snow day, it'll be the following Saturday, the 28th. Same time.
Thank you, Colleen.
Well, we weren't here 2 weeks ago, so I wasn't able to give my update. I know Mike touched on it from the Planning Commission, but at the Planning Commission back in February, there were 2 items on the agenda. The first was an update from our planner from the Montgomery County, Meredith, giving us an update on the proposed Ridge Pike business ordinance. It's coming along. She made some changes with respect to high-density multifamily dwellings at certain intersections up there, so we're expecting to probably see an ordinance come before us up here shortly. And then the other issue was the Recreation Overlay Facility District ordinance, proposed ordinance that was discussed, and it'll be discussed again next Wednesday.
And Meredith is scheduled to come before us, before the board, April the 1st.
The Sewer Authority also met. A lot of their discussion involved EDUs with proposed development. At this time, are there any questions or comments from the audience? Yes, gentlemen.
I'd like to make a safety.
Can you come up, please?
I'd just take a minute. Irv Zimmerman, 301 Evansburg Road. I travel Germantown Pike a lot. And right across from the Evansburg State Park, I don't know, it's buildings and grounds building there or something. There's an old honeysuckle monkey vine, I called it years ago, and we used to climb them and swing. It's about 2.5, 3 inches, and it's hanging down. The other day I'm going eastbound, and a Methacton school bus come down, and of course, he didn't want to take his mirror off, so he kind of swerved over into my lane, but I was observant about it. And I see that all the time, and I really appreciate if somebody would take a look at that, because I think it's going to cause maybe an accident at some time. It's very readily seen going eastbound. If somebody's in a bus or a truck or something, I said, oh my goodness, I said, maybe a tractor trailer will hit it, and knock it down. It's hanging down pretty low, I mean, you could hit it with a triaxle dump truck or, like they say, that bus. It was funny, I mentioned to my wife down the street from us, I said, oh, there's a walnut tree down there. Watch when you get down there, that none of them walnuts fall off. Don't you know one walnut went off and hit the windshield and broke it? So I'm just concerned about that that funny sucker vine.
Mr. Primus, can you have your gentleman take a look at that, please?
Yeah, it's right across from the that maintenance shed there. It's give or take a couple 100 feet either way. I just forget where it is, but I see it every day, and I get concerned about it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Yes, sir. Come on up. Yep. Sorry. It's the only way for your question to make it onto the recording.
Rich Opperman again from Collegeville Road. What's going on with the Collegeville Inn?
We can't comment on it, but at this time, but we're hearing a lot of the same things that are being heard in the public. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's funny though, they put that new road in or that new bridge, right? It'll be something like up to George Washington in New York there. They have Fort Lee down there. Will they get off and go down and patronize Shady Maple, right?
Mr. Boer, I saw your hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Board, for the chipper and the truck. I guess you can all remember what happened when we had the windstorm go through and these guys were trying to chop up they were borrowing everybody else's but their brothers. Thank you. You touched on the 4x4. I'd also like to thank John and his crew about Pinetown Road. The bottom of Pinetown Road that Nielsen was supposed to pave, but he got that covered up with the water company now, so they got it all fixed up, pothole after pothole. So that's all been taken care of.
And Mr. Borai, that's going to be completely repaved coming in the next coming months.
I'm talking to your mom. And the guy with the green tie up there, you're 2 days late and $1 short.
It's blue.
You said you're talking about your car being broken down. It couldn't happen in Lower Providence. Now, it had to happen in East Norton. We have no potholes in Lower Providence. And the Schwinn doesn't cost $30,000, so, you may as well be in shape and ride a Schwinn back and forth. The other thing I have, Mr. Chairman and Board, please tell me that the doors are being knocked down were applicants for the zoning hearing board. We definitely need an alternate on that board.
Now, I tried to make an announcement as chairman last meeting, but we had a difficult time with our TV, and so I'm asking you again that we do need an alternate member. We have a problem. We were missing a member for an important meeting. And, you know, I try to tell the people that the hours are short and the money's great. So with that.
And I do have one name to put out before the board, and I hope to do that and perhaps get a vote on that in April.
Yeah, you're also going to need somebody on the sewer authority, too.
Yes, we do.
And incidentally, too, I'd like to pass on what Nancy said about Carl, too. I served on the board with Carl, and he was a great guy. Please don't put stars on those names out there on the board, you know, deceased stars, because I don't want to come there yet. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Nancy?
I don't have a question. I just want to thank you for recognizing me, but I want you to know that I did a lot of moving around shopping over the weekend, and every time I left Lower Providence, it was one pothole after another, and you guys did a great job. But there's one area you have to check. I went to Mary's Church on Sunday, and I went through the industrial park, and near the FedEx box up near Trooper Road was a goose. No other, you know, one goose, Canadian goose. And I looked over, and I looked again, and there's a pothole right against the curb, and another goose was nested in it. So you better take care of that, because that could really ruin our reputation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I really mean it. I was in both ends of the county, or the township area. Out of the township, the roads were bad. They were really bad. You guys did a good job this year, and it was a bad year.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
Yeah.
Any final comments or questions? Thank you all for bearing with us tonight. We had an ambitious agenda with the cancellation of our first March meeting. I would remind the public that our next regularly scheduled meeting is a deviation. It will not be held on Thursday the 2nd instead. It will be held on Wednesday, April 1st. So Wednesday, April 1st, not Thursday the 2nd. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all, and please stay safe in the snow tomorrow.